Okay, and I think this is lesson number 33.
Yep.
Number 33, my wife says that's what it is, so I'll take her word for it. 33 on how to study the Bible. We finished up last week on harmful methods of interpretation. And even though, as we looked at those harmful methods, we said there's some value, a little bit of value in each and every one of them. If you go strictly with each and every one, there can be some dangers. The one thing that we haven't done, though, is really set forth a good method of interpretation, have we? I think we ought to do that, though, shouldn't we? Yeah. So let's talk about what we should use. And we'll talk about, now this is a popular method of Bible study, but more than just a popular method of Bible study, it is a critical method of Bible study. And I say that in this sense. In a popular, as a popular method of Bible study, you can get on the internet and you can find this, but it's very superficial in a lot of ways. Now, it'll explain to you you need to do deeper study, but it leaves you with a superficial idea of what an inductive Bible study is. Now, I'll explain this as we go along. So I don't want you to be, there are a lot of people that'll do what they think is really an inductive Bible study, but it's not. It's just pick a passage, what do you think this says, write it down, you're done for the day. You know, it's like a daily Bible study, pick a verse, you know, here's what I think it means, boom. You know, to do really good Bible study, it takes some time, doesn't it? 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 15. King James says, study to show yourself approved unto God, right? But the newer translations say, be diligent. Why? Because it takes work. I'm sorry, it doesn't come easy. And if we're looking for an easy way to get to heaven, we haven't read what Jesus said about it. Yeah, straight is the gate and narrow is the way. It takes some effort, all right? So, we're going to look at the inductive method of interpretation. Now, the key element between deductive and inductive reasoning, we're talking about reasoning, is the term observation. Observation, and I'll explain that, okay? Deductive reasoning starts from a general hypothesis or a premise to reach a specific logical conclusion. Deductive reasoning usually begins with a premise, then a second premise. Based on those premises, we reach a logical conclusion. For example, okay, all men are mortal. Women too, but all men defined as human beings. Socrates is a man. Is it true that all men are mortal? Yes. Is it true that Socrates is a man? Yes, that means Socrates is mortal. That's deductive reasoning. See, you go from the general, all, to the specific. See how that goes? All right? And that comes from, let me go down here. Deductive, Socrates is mortal. Here we have two premises and a logical conclusion. Deductive reasoning goes from the general to the specific. That's from brainly.com. Know where I got that. All right? Inductive reasoning is a type of logic in which we observe specific phenomena and use those observations to make predictions about future similar phenomena. Remember, we're still talking about reasoning. We're not talking about interpretation yet. We're talking about reasoning. And those observations to make about similar phenomena, inductive logic makes broad generalizations from specific observations. Remember, deductive went from general to specific. This goes from specific to general, all right? And a perfect example of this hypothesis is the hypothesis of the black crows. All observed crows are black. Therefore, all crows are black. Everyone you've seen is black. Now, what if I say, oh, all automobiles are Fords?
Nope.
Everyone I've seen is a Ford. What's the problem?
It's based on
Everybody
Jerry's
else is
niche
selective logic.
I haven't done enough.
research.
What's the
Observation.
key word? Observation. Observation. There's the key word. And that's what I want you to understand on this, okay? My general feeling might be all Fords are the best, so, I just want to promote Fords, So, there you have it. So, here the observer is broadly generalizing the color of all crows in the universe from the observation of a particular group of crows. Inductive reasoning goes from the specific to the general. Guess where I got that from? Brainly.com, yes, very good. Now, deductive reasoning is best when you have absolutes of evidence. When you have absolutes of evidence. In textual studies, what do I mean by textual study? If you're reading a book, if you're reading a letter, if you're reading a will, if you're reading a contract, if you're reading a contract, you should use deductive reasoning for that. Why? Because a contract is a legal document, okay? Should there be figurative, metaphorical language in a contract? Absolutely not. Why? Because you want it to be specific. Okay? So, in textual studies, this would be especially true in the absence of figurative language. Now, for example, I've talked about it before, a square by definition has equal sides and equal degrees of angles. So if one side's 3 inches, what are the other sides?
3 inches.
3 inches, and thereby you know the perimeter is 12 inches, right? You know that there are 360 degrees of angle, right? And that all the other angles, or that all the angles are 90 degrees, because that's the definition of a square. That's deductive reasoning there. You can use deductive. And just because you're using an inductive reasoning in the inductive method of study does not mean you throw away deduction or deductive reasoning. Definitions become very important. So, you following me?
Amen.
But what if you're investigating an ancient book containing figurative language? An ancient book containing figurative language. What is the Bible? The Bible is a collection of 66 books written by 40 authors in 3 different languages on 3 different continents over approximately 1,600 years. Do you think you're going to have to look at some things and use some reasoning? Listen, can you go back, can you find some information deductively about definitions of words? 3 different languages, Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. Are there study materials that will tell you what those words mean? Because people have gone back and studied them? Yes, there is. But what? Be careful of scientism. That's a big word. Have you ever heard that word before? Scientism. What is scientism? All right. When Lance was getting his master's degree in history, okay, he had to study people from the past. But I don't mean just people from the past. He had to study people who wrote about people and events in the past. They're called what's the term I want to use? In other words, they're the authorities. There are certain people. Now, if you're looking in the Bible about authorities, and historical writing about the Bible, you would say, well, Josephus is an authority because he wrote during the time of Christ, or shortly thereafter. So he's an authority, right? Wait a minute, he had some prejudices, didn't he? He was Jewish. He was writing for the Romans. Yeah. And you can go through, even in American history. What's the big deal? What are they trying to change about American history now? All those founding fathers were evil because they were slave owners and such, all right? So what do you do with all those historians who wrote about George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and all those men? Well, all of those authorities, see, they're coming into question. Well, scientism would say you've got to pay attention to what they wrote. And the new liberal aspect of it says you don't pay attention to them. You just write what the current mood reflects, okay? So you've got to be careful. Why? Just take archaeology. All right, there's a man by the name of Ramsay who was a great archaeologist. And a lot of things that Ramsay wrote are now in question. Why? Because, well, Ramsay wrote 150 years ago, maybe. All right. So a lot of things, there's a lot more information now, and maybe what came from his culture, he imposed on that. So the inductive reasoning will allow you to consider the new evidence also, where deductive reasoning will say, no. All right, for Lance to get his master's degree in history, he had to know what those authorities said. Because if he's writing his master's thesis and he says, "Oh, I just don't agree with so and so and so," his professor's going to say, "No, you got to know what those authorities said." So we got to watch. Listen, it happens in medicine. It happens in it happens in theology, right? Because if you want to get a doctoral degree in theology, you got to go to either a Protestant university or you have to go to a Catholic university. And you have to learn their systems. See? Now you can go there and you can learn those systems and you can not agree with them, but whatever you write, you've got a right to get that degree. And I say W-R-I-T-E. You've got to write it to get that degree, even if you don't agree with it, right? So sometimes the degree isn't worth it, okay? I'll just throw that in for that. So be careful, because we as human beings make mistakes, okay? But the inductive reasoning allows for going back, looking at more of the evidence. All right, the Bible contains a copious amount of figurative language. I love that word, copious. Right? That means a bunch. There's a bunch of it in there. So, and we talked about it before. The great red dragon and the serpent, who is the devil. That's figurative language. Right? But if you take it literally, if you're deducting and you take it literally, you're going to be in trouble, right? Because it's got to be true all the way through. And is that really what he looks like? Well, no. Well, why is he like a dragon? Well, think of what a dragon is. Fire-breathing, monstrous enemy, destroying stuff. Serpent, poisonous, sneaky, slimy, slithering. All that kind of kind of stuff. That's the picture you want. Okay? Biblical interpretation at face value demands a leaning toward inductive interpretation. And I say it leans toward it. All right? For example, definition of words first takes a deductive application. What does this word mean? What's the definition of this word? You can go, you can find it. How was it used when it was spoken or when it was written? All right? Then the figurative meaning is induced from that. Go tell that fox. Does that mean Herod is literally a fox? No. What's a fox? Well, a fox is an animal that's a sly animal. Oh, now I can induce from that. Herod was sly. See, he was kind of a sneaky person too. So you must, but you have to know what a thing is to be able to compare it to something else. And that takes that inductive reasoning or inducing, okay, rather than deducing. Now, inductive reasoning demands that all facts or evidence be reported. Okay? Remember, I gave you a riddle a few weeks ago. 2 fathers, 2 sons go fishing. Every man catches a fish. They don't eat any, they don't throw any back. They come back with 3 fish. How can that be true? You cannot deduct that. You have to induce, right? Okay? So, that happens with the Bible. Why? Because it's not always talking straightforward in things. Okay? It might be talking about something here and something just a little bit different here. So you've got to compare the two. But get all of the evidence. And once you get all the evidence and you bring it together, then you figure out the truth. Another good example is you put all 4 accounts of the resurrection of Jesus together. And you have a broader story than you have with just each of the accounts by itself. And it's amazing. It really is to put it together like that. And you see the women coming and the women going back and Mary running faster than the 2 older women. And she gets Peter and John. Peter and John run faster than she does. And the 2 women get back and Mary's already gone back and Peter and John are leaving. I said, oh, now we see how all this fits together. But you got to get all the evidence together and line it up. And when you do, you begin to see these things. Following me?
Gotcha.
Observation. Get all the evidence together. By reporting all the facts and allowing them, the facts, to speak, no error will be possible. Unless what? There are some facts that you don't know. And listen, there are going to be some facts that we don't know. Right? Deuteronomy 29:29. The secret things belong to God, but the things that are revealed belong to us so that we can know how to do the will of God. Now, no interpretation of the facts can be true which does not harmonize with all other known facts. There's no contradictions in the Bible. They can be figured out. Some of it's matters of translation, but that's where you have to go back to figuring out the definitions and getting all the facts lined up. And this is termed the law of analogy. 2 truths are never contradictory. 2 truths are never contradictory. First of all, what is a contradiction?
Difference in opinion.
Not in logical terms. In logical terms, it's not a difference of opinion, because an
One
opinion is
saying
not a
one thing,
fact.
one person saying one thing about something, one other person saying something different about maybe the same thing.
Yeah, but it's not just exactly different. It is the word not. Okay. That pew cover, whatever you call it, is blue. Contradiction, that pew cover is not blue. Those are contradictory. Just the word not in there. Because you can say, well, that's blue, that's dark blue. That's not a contradiction. That's an opinion, see? And that's somebody saying something different. But in logic, not. See? Jesus is the Son of God. Jesus is not the Son of God. Now you've got a logical contradiction there, and that can be argued out. Well, then what do? Well, you line up the evidence. What's your evidence for it? Okay? Following me? Following me. So, two truths are never contradictory. So one of those has to be untrue. Jesus is either the Son of God or he's not the Son of God. Both can't be true. Now, both could be wrong.
Amen.
Say, both could be wrong, but they can't both be true. Here's the kicker. Jesus used this method of interpretation. Not only Jesus, Stephen used it. I was reading a passage. Stephen used this. Paul used it. Who else? Philip used this. Okay? Let me go through here. Jesus used this method of interpretation. Luke chapter 24, verse 13 through 27. This is after the resurrection. Two disciples decide we're skedaddling. Two apostles. We're getting out of Jerusalem. We might be next, right? So, that very day, two of them were going to a village named Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and they were talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing together, Jesus himself drew near and went with them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What is this conversation that you are holding with each other as you walk?" And they stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, named Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days?" He said to them, "What things?" And they said to him, "Concerning Jesus of Nazareth, a man who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and rulers delivered him up to be condemned to death and crucified. But we," now catch this, "but we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel." That was what the Old Testament prophecy about the Messiah, right? He would be Israel's redeemer. "Yes, and beside all this, it is now the third day since these things happened. Moreover, some women of our company amazed us. They were at the tomb early in the morning, and when they did not find his body, they came back saying that they had even seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but him they did not see." Now, the rest of this is what Jesus then says. "And he said to them, O foolish ones, and slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Was it not necessary that the Christ, or Messiah, should suffer these things and enter into his glory? And beginning with Moses," now where's Moses at? Think, 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 induce, induce, induce. Where's Moses at? Beginning with Moses. Where's Moses at?
Way back in the beginning.
The beginning of
The Exodus.
the Old
Testament.
Testament. Okay? Beginning with Moses and all the prophets. Everything else is prophets. Even the Psalms, prophets, prophecy, right? He interpreted to them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. What did he do? He put forth all the evidence, didn't he? So Jesus introduced all the facts about himself from the scripture so that the two disciples could understand the truth that he is the Messiah. He is the Redeemer of Israel. And what do they do after Jesus goes away? They turn around and go back to Jerusalem, don't they? And they get back there and they tell this story. Didn't our hearts burn as he was telling this to us? Okay. That's the inductive method of Bible study. Not superficial. Just pull out a passage and say, oh, this is what it means to me. No. And even if you go to the sites that talk about it, and people will follow it and actually do it that way, they'll caution you, don't do it that way. It takes a little deeper study. Is that the way human beings work?
Amen.
Huh? No, it's not the way human beings work. You know, we're going to try to take the easy way out, aren't we? Okay? Can't do it. But that's the pattern to start with, and we'll deal more with that next week. I think it's going to take about 2 more weeks to do this. And then, after we do that, we get this down. Let's see, next week we'll do some more on that inductive study. I think the next week, 8 rules or how to do it. And then the week after that, Lord willing, now it might change, we'll actually start looking at the Bible survey so we can start from the beginning, from Genesis. It'll be a totally different study. Start with that Bible survey and look at each book and say, well, here's what's in it. So that you have that basis starting for, well, what's in there? Who's mentioned in there? What's important in there? Okay? Now, I know you've been looking forward to it.
Amen.
Now, all of that we've studied up to this morning, say, has been the cake. Now we got the icing. See, now we're putting the really good stuff on top of it. All right. Thank you for your time and thank you for your attention. Class is